Hello everyone, and welcome to the MMBI Middle Market Business Index briefing for quarter 3 2023. Now, Q3 was in the field between the 5th and the 25th of July of this year, an interesting time just before the summer recess. And we're going to spend a few minutes today just discovering some of the findings of the index for Q3, and also just to debate, well, what does that mean for the wider economy? And I'll be joined by our resident economist, Tom Pugh, for that. But before we get there, a number of clients have been saying to us over recent months, well, could you just explain again what is the MMBI? Well, it's certainly more than just a survey. So to explain the MMBI, far better than anyone I know can do, is one of the architects of MMBI. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague, Kevin Depew from San Diego in the US. Kevin.
We launched the US Middle Market Business Index, the MMBI, in 2015. So although it's still a recent addition to the suite of economic data we're already producing, we partnered with the US Chamber of Commerce. That level of credibility means that the MMBI's data can't be dismissed as just one firm's opinion. The index truly is a reliable, impartial source of information about every aspect of the real economy. It's now relied on to show the underlying health of the middle market and highlight the issues that are important to those firms. Because the index is constructed using the same methodology in the UK, we're expecting it to do similar things for the UK's real economy too.
Thanks very much, Kevin, for that insightful briefing about the index. So, without further ado, let's get on to the quarter 3 results. And to explain that, here's our resident economist, Tom Pugh.
The MMBI jumped in Q3, hitting 146.5. That's 18 points higher than in Q2. And that strength is across the board and is being driven by a range of factors. And it speaks to the general economic resilience that we've seen both here in the UK and elsewhere in the developed world. So let's dive into a bit more detail on the resilience of the MMBI. One of the key things driving the strength in the middle market is that input costs are finally starting to ease. The proportion of firms saying they were having to pay more for their inputs fell, but at the same time, the share of firms saying they were able to charge more for their goods and services rose strongly. That combination is driving revenue and profits higher, and both are expected to continue to increase over the next 6 months. We're seeing similar resilience in the MMBI labour market indicators. Stronger profit growth means demand for labour in the middle market is holding up well. In contrast, there are now signs that that extremely tight labour market in the economy as a whole is starting to ease. Over half of middle market firms said they increased pay in Q3, and the proportion of firms saying they hired more labour jumped. So while this is pretty positive news for the middle market, it does pose a problem for the Bank of England and their efforts to tackle inflation. We can go into that in a bit more depth back with Simon.
Great stuff. Now, Tom, thanks very much for that briefing. I guess there's a couple of things that are kind of surprising me with that. Firstly, the marked increase in the index, which you explained. You know, that was in the field between the 5th and the 18th of July, around mid-July time. How is that skewing maybe those results, do you think?
I think it's important to put it into context a little bit. So if we cast our mind back to, say, the beginning of this year, the Bank of England was forecasting the biggest squeeze in living standards on record, a pretty significant recession. Actually, none of that has really come to pass. We've not had stellar economic growth, but we have had some growth. We haven't fallen into a recession. And I think that's being reflected in the index as a bit of just relief that these kind of big recession that was forecasted hasn't really come to pass yet.
That it wasn't as bad as forecast by some in the...
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, it's still been bad. I mean, some industries, some sectors have been faced with
yeah.
dramatic issues.
Yeah.
But okay. And then the recessionary challenges, there is still a threat of recession. Let's be under no doubt. We're not in the clear by any stretch of the imagination, are we?
Absolutely not. The resilience that the economy's shown so far has been surprising and has been pretty good, pretty positive. But there are signs that that is starting to weaken now. We think Q3 will actually be pretty good, but as we get further into kind of the winter and into next year, the accumulated weight of the interest rate rises that we've already had are just going to bear down on the economy more and more. Recession isn't our what we call a base case, so our main forecast, but we don't have very much growth, so it wouldn't take very much to kind of tip that balance back over to recession.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the kind of weight of the interest rate rises that the MPC have been putting through over recent times. How much of it is a lag? Because the interest rates go up, it's news in the media. There's impact on consumers, mortgage rates, food prices, fuel, etc. But how much of a lag? Have they overcooked that, and therefore is the index almost flattering to deceive as a result of that?
We've probably seen the impact of about half of the rate rises we've already had. That's partly because now lots of people have much longer mortgages than they did last time.
Yep.
There's also a lot more people who have fully paid off their mortgage, so are completely insulated from rate rises. That means the impact is just going to take a bit longer to work its way through to impact the economy than it would have done when we last had interest rate rises in 2006, say, for example. So that, as we said before, that's the reason why towards the end of this year into early next year, we will see economic growth starting to falter again.
I mean, it's pretty marginal at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, exactly. So this is why, the tipping point, we go from plus 0.1 to minus 0.1.
Yeah.
Perhaps that is really only interesting to people like me and the media, but it does have a psychological impact. We go from talking about recovery to resilience to recession. It dents consumer growth, it dents kind of corporate animal spirits, and all of that has a knock-on effect on the economy.
Well, let's just talk about these corporate animals that are listening now. I mean, one of the interesting aspects in the index for Q3 was the easing of the labour market, which you mentioned. Now, clearly that isn't affecting every sector, every industry group the same, but I'm quite surprised about that easing because we're not seeing that easing manifesting itself in pay rises being held back. I mean, compensation rates are going up for most across most industries. Is there not a clash of views there?
So it's a really interesting point, actually, that when we look at kind of the official data covering the whole economy, we have seen that labour market easing. We've seen the unemployment rate go from 3.8 to 4.2 over in the space of a couple of months. You're right, that hasn't fed through into lower wage growth at all. I think that that's really just a lagged effect. It normally takes about 6 months from a rise in the unemployment rate to kind of feed through to lower wage growth. So I think we're just having a lag.
Because if I heard you right, so pretty much half of the respondents in Q3 for the indices said that they'd increased pay and compensation in Q3. Right. So you're expecting that to turn?
So I think it will. So I think this is one of the interesting things in the survey is actually that easing in the labour market that we've seen across the whole economy hasn't really been reflected in the middle market yet. The middle market was still very strong in terms of demand for labour and pay growth.
Yeah.
I do suspect that there is a lagged effect here, and over the next 6 to 12 months, we'll see the middle market employment conditions start to turn a little bit.
But it's interesting, it's a bit of a catch-22 here, isn't it? Because if the middle market are paying more, that is giving the regional coordinators for the Bank of England, for instance, when they're fact-finding, all the data they need to basically say this isn't under control yet, inflation is still rising, or is rising less quickly, I should say. Prices are rising less quickly than they were before. There's more of a reason to increase rates 1 more 2 more times. I don't know, how many times would you suggest, given that lag?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this is the kind of data that will give the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee a bit of a headache. They're looking at some of this stuff, saying we want to see the labour market easing, we want to see that unemployment rate going up, but really they want to see pay growth coming down and inflation coming down. The fact that the middle market is able to continue raising prices and then is able to continue hiring more and paying more is going to give them pause for thought, at least. We've said at least 1 more rate hike, possibly 2. But remember, that won't come until November. There's a lot of data to come between now and November.
Sure.
And given how kind of what limited economic growth there is, if we are kind of looking down the barrel of a recession come November, December time, that rate hike, that final rate hike may not happen. So definitely 1, question mark over the second.
Question mark over the second. And I suppose the other aspect I'm thinking about, it was interesting that respondents to the index were saying that input prices were coming down, great, but they were still maintaining or able to increase their revenue and their sales prices. Clearly, that can't last. I mean, it seems very resilient and positive for the middle market, but less so for what the Bank of England are trying to do, I would have thought.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We've seen a bit of margin defence, I think, in Q3, or trying to rebuild some of those margins that have been perhaps squeezed over the last year. It's clearly not sustainable. I think as input prices continue to fall, we will see what we call output prices, so middle market firms selling prices, start to come down as well. It's good. It's been a very positive quarter for the middle market by all accounts.
It sure has. Thanks very much, Tom. Thanks for the briefing. Now, that's quite interesting, isn't it? It has been a positive quarter for the middle market. I think what we all need to do is just reflect on what does that mean for us and our own businesses, and do our views align with the index? So please go along to the Middle Market Business Index website as part of our Real Economy pages on our website, and see what you think. See if that aligns to your findings. And by all means, reach out to Tom and myself, and we can have a chat about what does that mean for your business going forward. And I guess the other thing, Tom, is look out for the Q4 index. That's going to be fascinating, what comes through in the autumn. Well, look, I hope you found the briefing interesting. I hope you like our new look and feel. It's all part of the evolution, as I said earlier. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.